7. Rachel Wadley. Rachel Wadley, rapper Tekashi 6ix9ine's girlfriend, was arrested on August 28, 2022 for reportedly punching her boyfriend in the face while outside a club in Miami. The 25-year-old Instagram star, who's better known as Jade, had been dating the rapper for 4 years when the incident took place. According to police, the couple was kicked out of a fancy restaurant called Kiki on the River before getting into an argument outside the establishment. Tekashi, who was born Daniel Hernandez, then apparently told officers afterward that Rachel had punched him. When police arrived at the scene, they noticed that the rapper had a minor injury on his cheek, purportedly from his girlfriend's fist. A security guard that had witnessed the entire encounter then corroborated this notion by stating that Rachel had thrown several punches at the controversial music star. There are also claims that the woman had yanked on Tekashi's chain around his neck. Rachel was arrested on charges of battery related to the domestic violence incident. She was initially held at a Miami-Dade County jail on a $1,500 bail. However, despite their differences, Tekashi told TMZ that he was working to free his girlfriend from behind bars. It's not exactly known if the couple is still together or not, but it's clear that they have a volatile relationship, one that's likely fueled by booze and drugs based on Tekashi's bizarre appearance alone. 6. Tommy Lee. In February 1998, Pamela Anderson's then-husband Tommy Lee was arrested for several crimes, including child and spousal abuse and unlawful possession of a firearm. This may come as no surprise nowadays. Pam aired out her relationship with the co-founder and drummer for heavy metal band Motley Crue when she released her Netflix docu-series called Pam: A Love Story back in late January 2022. But when news broke of the violent exchanges between the Hollywood couple in the late 1990s, people were shocked to learn what was really going on behind closed doors. Pam and Tommy first met each other on New Year's Eve in 1994. The two of them had apparently visited the same bar with their separate friend groups, and Pam got Tommy's attention by sending him a shot of Goldschlager. The drummer then went over and introduced himself to the blonde bombshell, who he described as radiantly standing out from everyone around her. Then, according to Tommy's pal Guerin Swing, who was interviewed by The Sun, after hitting it off, Tommy licked Pam's face from chin to temple. This bizarre public display of affection seemed to have a lasting effect on the Playboy model, because 2 months later, Pam and Tommy got married on a beach in Cancun after embarking on a whirlwind romance. The nuptials were a rather casual affair, as the pair were photographed exchanging their rings in their bathing suits, with Pam opting to replace a white wedding dress with a white bikini. From there, the couple went on to have 2 sons, and despite a tiff between them in November 1996 when Pamela filed for divorce, they stayed together and seemed to be quite in love based on ample photographs of them looking head over heels for each other. But in February 1998, the fairy tale romance was exposed to be a lie when Pam reported Tommy's violent behavior to the police. Pam, once again, filed for divorce that same year on February 26th, 2 days after her husband was arrested. The altercation was later revealed as Pam described the final straw that broke their marriage in her 2023 book, Love, Pamela. Tommy had apparently grown jealous of Pam's Baywatch co-star, David Chikachi, who she shared a kiss with in the last season of the show. But the drummer's jealousy turned into a blind rage one night when he reportedly kicked his then-wife while she had their infant son in her arms. Tommy then grabbed Pamela's phone out of her hand before twisting her arm violently, tearing off one of the actress's nails in the process, causing her to bleed. This is eventually what led Pam to report Tommy to the police, although surely there was more going on than this isolated incident. On May 21, 1998, Tommy was sentenced to 6 months behind bars after being found guilty of beating Pam. However, the child abuse charges that were brought against him were dropped, and shortly after, their divorce was finalized. 5. Paul Snyder. Canadian model and actress Dorothy Stratten, who was legally born Dorothy Ruth Hoogstraten, was murdered on August 14, 1980 by her manager and estranged husband, Paul Snyder. The couple had been on the rocks for quite some time leading up to the incident, as they were in the process of breaking business ties and divorcing one another. Stratten had started to move on with her life and had embarked on a new relationship with director Peter Bogdanovich, with whom she was living in Los Angeles with when Snyder broke into their shared estate with a handgun. On that night, July 31st, 1980, Snyder laid in wait for Stratten, hiding among the shadows of the property. But after hours of inactivity, he decided to leave. Then, a week later, Stratten and Snyder met up with each other for the first time in almost 3 months at the former home they shared together in West LA. Snyder was hoping that the two of them could reconcile their relationship, but Stratten hit him with the harsh news that she had fallen in love with Bogdanovich and wished to finalize their separation. After their meeting on August 8, 1980, Snyder was forced to return the handgun he'd borrowed from an acquaintance. But over the next few days, the man would become obsessed with getting another firearm. He even went as far as to ask the private detective he'd hired to purchase a machine gun for him, since he'd been denied due to his Canadian citizenship. But the detective refused, and rightfully so, because at that point Snyder wasn't in his best state of mind. Unfortunately though, Snyder would come to possess a 12-gauge shotgun that he bought from a private seller he'd discovered in a local classified ad, acquiring it on August 13th. Later that same evening, Snyder reportedly told friends that he was going to take up hunting, which is eerie considering what he did the next day. At around noon on August 14th, Stratten showed up for an arranged meeting with Snyder at the man's rented home in LA. Before arriving, Stratten spoke with her business manager about the amount of property settlement that she'd offer her then-husband during her meetup with him that afternoon. The actress wanted to handle things like adults and even told her business manager that she wanted to be friends with Snyder after everything had settled down, but things didn't go how she planned. At 8 p.m. that same day, Snyder's two roommates returned to the house they shared with the Canadian nightclub promoter to find Stratten's car still parked in the driveway. Upon entering the home, they noticed Snyder's bedroom was locked and Stratten was nowhere to be seen. Assuming the married couple had reconciled and just wanted some privacy, they spent the next couple of hours watching TV in the living room, not knowing the gruesome scene that waited for them behind the long door. However, after receiving a distressing phone call from Snyder's private detective shortly after 11 p.m., the roommates forced their way into Snyder's room and discovered both Stratten and Snyder lying naked and lifeless on the bed. The police timeline placed Stratten's murder as occurring within 1 hour of her arrival at the home. Snyder then turned the weapon on himself about an hour after he killed his wife. The news of his girlfriend's murder absolutely broke Bogdanovich, who apparently had to be sedated after learning the gruesome details of her death. Her family was also heartbroken and surprised that Snyder could carry out such an evil crime. Stratten's body was later cremated, and her remains were buried at the Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in LA. But the woman's memory lives on in the movies she starred in and the lives she touched throughout her short but successful career. 4. Brynn Hartman. Phil Hartman worked as a graphic designer in the early stages of his career before quickly gaining fame and notoriety after making a name for himself in the comedy scene. After impressing the iconic Groundlings troupe when he volunteered to go on stage during one of their performances in LA, he was invited to join their traveling comedy group. Not only did he prove himself to be a natural showman but an excellent writer as well. He even went on to come up with the well-known character Pee Wee Herman with actor Paul Reubens. Then, in 1986, Hartman landed his dream job as a cast member of Saturday Night Live, where he showcased his comedic talent and became an instant success. By the time he left the show in 1994, he had won an Emmy for his writing and had been nominated for another as an impressive member of SNL. Hartman also played a recurring character on the hit TV show The Simpsons. However, despite the man's on-screen success, Hartman's love life proved to be more difficult. For a brief period of time between 1970 and 1972, he'd been married, and then in 1982, he tied the knot again, but it didn't work out any better for him this time, and he split from his then-wife 3 years later in 1985. And although Hartman was known for his electric personality and charisma on stage, he was far more low-key offstage, sometimes even to a fault. Heartbroken and defeated after his divorce from his second wife Lisa Jarvis, Hartman began to look for a new companion. And it didn't take long for him to meet his soon-to-be third wife, Brynn. According to Hartman's biographer, Mike Rogers, the comedian's relationships always started out very intensely, both emotionally and sexually, but eventually these flings would fizzle out. However, things seemed to be different this time, and after meeting each other on a blind date in 1986, Hartman and Brynn married just a year later. The entertainer's friends and family reported that he'd never been happier than he was in the mid-1990s, which made sense considering that Brynn had made Hartman a father by giving birth to their two children, a girl named Bergen and a son named Sean. But in reality, things weren't all sunshine and roses, because it was later evident that Brynn had grown jealous of Hartman's ample success after her own modeling and acting career failed to get off the ground. The man's reclusive behavior was also an apparent factor in the pair's relationship issues. Months went by, and the couple began arguing constantly. And although they'd typically make up after fighting, they'd always be at each other's throats shortly after reconciling. Brynn, in particular, had trouble controlling her rage, and she seemed to thrive off of the attention she received when she'd lose her temper. On several occasions, things got so bad between the couple that Hartman was forced to restrain his volatile wife. And after a while, Hartman became so drained from the constant bickering and explosive outbursts from Brynn that instead of trying to mend things, he'd end their fights by walking away and going to bed. But without a resolution, things only grew worse, and eventually Brynn began to abuse alcohol and cocaine after being sober for years. By late May 1998, Brynn had spent several small stints in rehab facilities, where she tried to kick her addiction to drugs and alcohol, substances that seemed to fuel her violent tendencies. But things didn't get any better, and on the evening of May 27th, Brynn took her pent-up anger out on Hartman. That night, the woman had 2 drinks and initially didn't seem to be upset. But then, a fight sparked between the couple for unknown reasons, causing Hartman to retreat to their bedroom. However, things didn't end there. At roughly 2 a.m. the next morning, Brynn retrieved one of the couple's guns from their metal lockbox. She then ambushed Hartman as he was sleeping in bed and shot him multiple times in the chest and head. Unfortunately, Hartman died instantly. Later that day, Brynn confessed to her pal Ron Douglas that she'd murdered her husband. In hysterics, she then also called her friend Judy, who, upon hearing the news, hightailed it to the home Hartman shared with Brynn and their children. Douglas reported the crime to the police, who showed up at the residence and removed 9-year-old Sean and 6-year-old Bergen from the house. Brynn, however, had locked herself in the bedroom she'd killed Hartman in and called her sister to tell her what happened. But when the police started to bang on the door for her to come out, she hung up the phone and ended her own life. 3. Jesse James. In 2007, while married to Sandra Bullock, Jesse James was hit with a fine of $271,250 by the California Air Resources Board, CARB, who claimed that the man's custom motorcycles had egregiously violated the Golden State's clean air laws. The illegal bikes were reportedly sold between 1998 and 2005, and according to California air regulators, these choppers were producing 10 times the legal limits of hydrocarbons allowed in the state. Investigators also found that Jesse's monster bikes didn't have state-certified emissions equipment on their fuel systems and exhaust. However, in a statement that was released by the man's publicist, Jesse, who was 37 years old at the time, said he was offended by the disclosure of the fine given to him by CARB. He also noted that the air police never responded to his offer to make the motorcycles he sold from his company, West Coast Choppers, more compliant with California's federal emission standards. Jesse felt that it was suspicious for an organization like CARB to put out press releases describing the cash settlement they're expecting to receive from West Coast Choppers. In another public statement addressing the issue, Jesse said, "If their CARB's intentions were really focused on the environment, they surely would have taken my offer to make all of the non-compliant motorcycles meet federal EPA standards." But according to him, the organization never accepted his offer and was instead only interested in the cash settlement. But despite his ill feelings toward Carb, Jesse ended up paying the hefty fine. But Jesse's business troubles weren't the only issues in his life. After marrying Sandra Bullock in 2005, the two seemed to have a good relationship with one another. But by 2010, things were beginning to take a turn for the worse. On March 17th, an interview with the model and Michelle Bombshell McGee was printed in Touch magazine, which titled the cover story "The Ultimate Betrayal." Throughout the interview, the model detailed her 11-month affair with Jesse, which had allegedly taken place while Bullock was filming The Blind Side. The next day, Jesse issued a public apology to his then-wife and his 3 children, although he claimed that most of the allegations brought against him were untrue. But this denial to take accountability for his actions would soon come back to bite him, because over the next week or so, several more women would come forward and claim to have had adulterous relations with him. The second woman, Melissa Smith, told Star magazine that she'd carried on an affair with Jesse for 2 years. And the third woman, Brigitte Daguerre, aired out her relationship with Jesse, which allegedly began in 2008, to TMZ. By April 2010, 5 women had accused Jesse of being unfaithful to Bullock, which ultimately broke the Hollywood couple's relationship. The man's 5th mistress, Marilee Girth, also ended up suing him for sexual harassment following their alleged affair. Sandra Bullock eventually filed for divorce in late April of that same year, but their legal separation wasn't finalized until June 2012. Nowadays, Bullock seems to be doing quite well for herself, and she started dating a new man, Brian Randall. And although the new couple seems to be doing well, it'll likely take a while before Bullock's ready to fully commit to someone again by marrying them, given her past track record with unfaithful men, aka Jesse James. 2. Sean Penn. On the Oprah Winfrey Show in 2012, Madonna opened up about her volatile relationship with film director and actor Sean Penn. During the interview, Madonna confirmed that during their marriage, Penn had physically abused her, claiming that the man would choke her, hit her, and on one occasion, he tied her to a chair and then beat her with a hairbrush. The Vogue singer then went on to say that she felt like a prisoner during her 4-year marriage to Penn. Following a whirlwind romance that was highly publicized, the pair got married in 1985. But after less than 5 years together, the couple called it quits and went their separate ways, finalizing their divorce in 1989. But what exactly happened to end their relationship had always been up for debate until Madonna addressed her marriage to Penn with Oprah in 2012. Their separation was announced after tabloids started to run stories about how Penn had trussed Madonna up like a turkey before he beat and assaulted her in a drunken rage one night in December of 1988. On that alleged night, Madonna, who was apparently still bloodied from her altercation with her husband, filed an assault complaint against Penn with the LA Sheriff's Department. And as a result, the film director was arrested. The complaint against Penn was later withdrawn by Madonna, although the couple's relationship was never the same again. Penn's reputation had already begun to deteriorate before these spousal abuse claims surfaced, due to his frequent violent interactions with the paparazzi. He even pleaded guilty in 1985 to 2 counts of battery and assault against a reporter from the UK, crimes for which he was sentenced to jail for 90 days. And in a more serious case, while filming a movie in Macau in 1986, he dangled a photographer who'd hidden in his hotel room over his 9th floor balcony upon finding him. For this, Penn was charged with attempted murder. However, the actor later reportedly broke out of jail and fled Macau on a jet ski, and eventually he was given a pardon by the Portuguese government. So, as you can tell, Sean Penn has a serious anger problem, and it comes as no surprise to find out that he directed some of his anger at his former wife Madonna. Although it's hard to hear stories of abuse, it's important to know what's acceptable in a relationship. And hopefully, if anyone watching this video is dealing with any kind of domestic violence, they'll find the strength to walk away from the situation. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. 1. Tommy Mottola. Singing for Mariah Carey has always been a form of escapism, and according to her, writing is a form of processing. And in Mariah's memoir, The Meaning of Mariah Carey, she describes exactly what she's had to process in the past, including a long history of infidelity, domestic abuse, and racism. The singer has admitted in the past that she largely owes her successful career to the boss of Columbia Records and Sony Music, Tommy Mottola. But in her memoir, she describes how trusting Mottola came at a heavy price. The two met each other in person at a Manhattan music industry party in 1988, after Mariah had given Columbia Records a demo tape of her singing. And upon hearing the woman's immense talent, Mottola searched for Mariah for 2 weeks before finally meeting her in Manhattan. Mariah was just 18 years old at the time, and Mottola was 21 years her senior, but he was the first wealthy man to sweep the young singer off her feet. Showering her with luxury instead of love, the two began to date. And in 1993, Mariah married Mottola after he proposed to her with a Cartier diamond ring. But not surprisingly, their relationship didn't last long, and the couple split in 1997, due in part to Mottola's controlling personality. And while things seemed amicable following their divorce, Mariah paints a much different picture of her marriage with the music industry boss in her memoir. She explained in the book how Mottola basically imprisoned her in their 50-acre estate, which she dubbed Sing Sing, referencing the local prison in Ossining, New York. The singer claims that she was constantly monitored and that everything, including the music she listened to, was controlled by Mottola. She described the man's presence in the memoir as dense and oppressive, and she also stated that his power was pervasive and that it came with an unspeakable unease. Mariah finally found the courage to leave Mottola when one night in front of his friends, he held a butter knife to her cheek and dragged it down her cheek menacingly after hearing of her desire to leave him. Their divorce was eventually finalized in 1998, but since then, Mariah's been doing quite well for herself. She's continued to work on her music, and she even went on to date other high-profile celebrities like Nick Cannon and Derek Jeter.
Number 9. Nestle Monterroso. 27-year-old Guatemalan hip-hop star Nestle Monterroso famously started a freestyle rap movement dedicated to empowering women who want to pursue careers in the music industry, and she was also a dedicated animal rights activist. Monterroso was last seen alive in early of December of 2022, leaving an office she owned in Guatemala City. When the people in her life stopped hearing from her for an unusually long period of time, they reported her missing. According to the U.S. Sun, residents who lived near the building reported a suspicious car with no plates to the police 3 days after the missing persons report was made. Witnesses recalled seeing a group of people dropping off the vehicle at around 10 o'clock p.m. outside an automotive repair shop. Responding officers found Monterroso's body inside a barrel in the trunk of the vehicle. An autopsy revealed that she was murdered via blunt force trauma to the head. The barrel was reportedly secured with rope, and locals claimed on social media that the young woman's body bore signs of extreme violence and that the barrel contained some kind of liquid. Authorities declined to go into detail about a possible motive for the murder or any additional findings or leads that could perhaps help explain what happened to Monterroso. Number 8. Tommy Lee. Before she made headlines in 2018 for getting arrested twice in less than 24 hours, rapper, model, and reality star Tommy Lee was best known for starring in VH1's Love and Hip Hop Atlanta series, and for her occasional brushes with the law. In the first incident, she allegedly lashed out at one of her 2 kids at the child's middle school. She was charged with battery, aggravated assault, and child cruelty. Tommy Lee bonded out for $27,000 and was ordered to stay away from her daughter. But she was accused of breaking the order within 3 hours of her release, and she wound up back in custody later that day. The infamous Bad Girl was formally indicted on 7 charges including aggravated assault, child cruelty, battery, aggravated stalking, and disrupting a public school. If convicted of all 3 felonies and 4 misdemeanors, she could have faced 54 years in prison. In 2019, the judge overseeing Lee's case spared her from prison altogether, She pleaded guilty to 5 charges, including cruelty to children, and was sentenced to 10 years of probation. Lee was ordered to complete a residential recovery program followed by a year of aftercare and to submit to regular drug tests, pay a $1,000 fine, abide by a curfew, remain in the state of Georgia unless she has permission to travel, and to stay completely out of trouble until her probation is over. Keeping her nose clean may prove to be easier said than done for Lee, who has a lengthy criminal history and gave birth to her first child in jail. Number 7. Jam Master Jay. Brooklyn-born DJ Jason William Mizell, better known as Jam Master Jay, made a name for himself spinning the turntables for the legendary hip-hop group Run DMC. The group exploded onto the scene during the 1980s and is widely credited with helping to establish hip-hop as a mainstream music genre. He was just 37 years old when he was fatally gunned down at his music studio in Queens in 2002. Authorities suspected that Mizell's murder may have resulted from his failure to support an industry blacklist of the rapper 50 Cent, who wrote about the exploits of convicted drug lord Kenneth McGriff in his song Ghetto Quran. McGriff was close friends with the founders of Murder Inc. Records, so he had some enormous pull in the industry for someone who wasn't an actual musician. In 2003, investigative journalist Frank Owen uncovered evidence possibly tracing the murder to a drug deal gone bad. Mizell's career had largely petered out by the late 90s, and his music alone wasn't enough to pay the bills or his mounting debts to the IRS. To take in some badly needed cash, he allegedly turned to drug dealing. Sources claim that shortly before the murder, Mizell failed to make good on a debt for 22 pounds of cocaine after getting into a dispute with the 2 men he was doing business with. This allegation was detailed in a 2020 murder indictment against Ronald Washington and Carl Jordan Jr., who were scheduled to go to trial in 2023. According to the most recent update, a federal judge approved prosecutors' request to seat an anonymous jury due to safety concerns given the defendant's history of witness intimidation. If convicted, the pair will face life in prison without parole. Number 6. Kid Creole. 63-year-old hip-hop pioneer Nathaniel Glover, who goes by the stage name Kid Creole, rose to fame during the late 1970s as a member of Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. The group's fame was iconic but short-lived, and they fell out of the spotlight decades before Glover resurfaced in the news headlines in 2017 for stabbing a homeless man to death. Surveillance footage showed Glover conversing with the victim, John Moley, in Midtown Manhattan before the pair disappeared off-screen, at which point Jolie was stabbed twice in the chest. Glover later told police that he was on his way to work when the incident happened. The 2 men didn't know each other, and he believed Jolie was coming on to him romantically. But Jolie was unarmed, and when Glover went on trial for murder, the judge told the jury to disregard any self-defense claims from his legal team. Glover was convicted of first-degree manslaughter and was sentenced to 16 years in prison, plus 5 years of post-release supervision. He'll be 71 years old when his earliest possible release date comes in 2031. Number 5. Tory Lanez. Canadian-born rapper Daystar Peterson, better known as Tory Lanez, was accused of shooting female rap star Megan Thee Stallion during an altercation in 2020. The pair were riding in an SUV in the Hollywood Hills together when they got into an argument, and things got personal when Megan insulted Lanez's music. As she walked away from the vehicle, Lanez allegedly fired his gun towards Megan's feet and yelled at her to dance. She underwent surgery to remove bullet fragments. Authorities arrested Lanez for the shooting, which he blamed on Megan's then best friend Kelsey Harris. According to Lanez, the women were fighting over him when he saw Harris pull a gun and tried to stop her from pulling the trigger. During closing arguments, his attorney George McDyson accused Megan of lying about everything in the case from the beginning and lying under oath. But the jury disagreed, and in 2022, Lanez was convicted of 3 gun-related charges, including assault with a firearm. He faces up to 22 years in prison, and he's awaiting sentencing. When the verdict was revealed, the 30-year-old's father began shouting at prosecutors, calling them evil, wicked people, and everyone was ordered to remain in the courtroom while he was removed. Number 4. Forrest Schaub. Known by the stage name DY, which stands for Die Young, Canadian rapper Forrest Schaub began making his own music and winning contests as a young teen. He scored a deal with CP Records in 2009 when he was in his mid-20s and also released his first single and toured with Akon that year. In early 2010, Schaub was featured in Billboard magazine as one of the best up-and-coming Canadian artists. The rising star was last seen in Toronto in August of that year. He had recently completed work on some new music and a video, and he told his friends and family that he planned to travel to Mexico to take a 2-week break from his cell phone. Schaub fell off the radar around the time, with his last known Twitter activity being a birthday wish to an acquaintance in early September. It's unclear whether he ever went to Mexico, but when the planned travel dates came and went with continued radio silence, his family knew something was wrong. They reported him missing to the Toronto police, but the disappearance was initially kept quiet to avoid negatively affecting his music career. In November, after not hearing from him for months, Schaub's loved one reported him missing in Mexico and also started putting the word out that they were looking for him. He was never found, and his fate remains a complete mystery to this day. Number 3. K. Flock. One day in 2021, 24-year-old Huáscar Hernandez was waiting to get his haircut at a barbershop in the Bronx when rising rap star K. Flock allegedly walked by and asked him what he was looking at. The men got into an argument, according to authorities, who accused Flock of fatally opening fire on Hernandez during the confrontation. Flock, whose birth name is Kevin Perez, turned himself in a week after the shooting. The 19-year-old faces a first-degree murder charge, and in early 2023, he was hit with federal racketeering charges. He and 7 others are accused of running 2 Bronx-based gangs called Sevside and Third Side. The U.S. Justice Department claims that between 2019 and 2022, the gangs collaborated indiscriminately to take out their rivals in the Belmont neighborhood and elsewhere throughout the Bronx and Manhattan, leaving entire communities terrorized by violence. They also allegedly referenced real-life acts of violence in their music and on social media. Sadly, Flock's decisions have derailed the talented teen from the promise of a successful rap career for now, and possibly for much longer depending on the outcome of his criminal cases. If convicted of the RICO charges, he'll face a mandatory life sentence in federal prison. A first-degree murder conviction could also mean life without parole. Number 2. Tim Dog. Hailing from the Bronx, Timothy Blair, better known as Tim Dog, made one of the first diss tracks that sparked the infamous East Coast-West Coast rap feud of the 1990s. Several of his early songs were critically acclaimed, but he eventually fell into the background. In 2011, Blair was accused of scamming a single mom from Mississippi out of $32,000. He met Esther Pilgrim online in 2007, and the pair began a long-distance relationship. Blair claimed he was trying to rebuild his music career and that he needed investors, as she generously used her credit card to help him out. When the case went to court, the forgotten rapper entered an Alford plea, which meant that he maintained his innocence, but admitted that the prosecution likely had enough evidence to secure a conviction. The judge ordered Blair to pay Pilgrim $19,000 in restitution in monthly $100 payments. Less than 2 years later, Pilgrim got a phone call informing her that the 46-year-old had passed away from diabetes complications. News of Blair's death spread quickly throughout the hip-hop community despite his status as a has-been. The media wasn't allowed at the funeral, which ended up being cancelled anyway. But there was a PayPal account eagerly taking donations for help with final expenses. The musician's passing remained heavily shrouded in mystery, leading to speculation that he may have faked his own death to get out of paying his debts to Pilgrim and possibly others. These suspicions only grew when searches for any records of Blair's death turned up empty-handed, and when a Mississippi prosecutor issued a warrant for his arrest. And Blair had a wife, but she was doing nothing to put the rumors to rest. Investigative reporters Dateline finally solved the mystery by calling funeral homes in the Atlanta area until they found one that had a record of the rapper's death. The business provided Blair's death certificate, which confirmed that he had died in 2013 after all, and that the county paid for his cremation. Nobody had known where to look for the record because nobody knew where he lived during his final days. No longer a national celebrity, his exit from the world was quiet, unglamorous, and largely unnoticed. And at number 1, Armani Kelly. In early 2023, 27-year-old aspiring rapper Armani Kelly drove 3 hours from his home in Oscoda, Michigan to Detroit to give his second live performance. He wasn't exactly a star yet. In fact, he had only recently gotten out of prison after serving 8 years for armed robbery. But his life was finally on a promising path as he pursued trade school and a musical career. During the drive up to the club with friends Montoya Givens and Dante Wicker, Kelly learned that the show was canceled due to technical issues. His fiancée, Taylor Perrin, said the trio planned to look for another venue to perform at. She knew something was very wrong when her text messages to Kelly stopped going through at around 9 o'clock that evening. The three were reported missing, and a multi-agency investigation was launched. Detroit Commander Michael McGinnis told the New York Times that it's highly unusual for more than one adult to go missing under the same exact circumstances. Law enforcement became increasingly perplexed as the days went by with no clue of what had happened. There'd been no activity on any of the men's phones since the night they vanished, and the car they were driving was located with no sign of the three. A teen who was found in possession of the vehicle was arrested, but it didn't seem to lead investigators any closer to answers. The following week, the remains of the three missing men were found buried in debris in the rat-infested basement of a decrepit, abandoned building near the venue Kelly had planned to perform at. They were shot to death, and it's unclear who might have done it or why. The investigation into the mysterious and heartbreaking case is ongoing.
Which of these celebrity spouses surprised you the most with their crimes? Let us know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see ya in the next one. Bye guys.